Every choice comes with a consequence. Once you make a choice, you must accept responsibility. You cannot escape the consequences of your choices, whether you like them or not. Good evening and welcome. This is Face the Nation. Our topic of discussion today is Sri Lanka's fertilizer crisis. Are we in a dilemma at the moment? Yes or no? To discuss all this and more, we've invited 4 guests to our studios this evening. All 4 of them are well-renowned academics in Sri Lanka in the subject of fertilizer and also soil. Let me quickly introduce them to you. Joining us this evening on the show are Professor Ananda Kulasurya, Emeritus Professor, University of Peradeniya, former Professor of Microbiology and former Dean, Faculty of Science, University of Peradeniya. Professor Gamini Seneviratna, Senior Research Professor, National Institute of Fundamental Studies. Professor Roshan Pereira, Professor of Chemistry and Biochemistry, former Professor of Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry, the University of Texas, USA. Professor B.F.A. Basnayaka, Emeritus Professor, Department of Agricultural Engineering, University of Peradeniya. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us this evening. I know 2 of you all have come all the way from Kandy today to attend the show. So thank you very much. A big salute to all 4 of you for joining us this evening on Face the Nation. Let's start off tonight's show with Professor Ananda Kulasurya, Emeritus Professor, University of Peradeniya, former Professor of Microbiology and former Dean, Faculty of Science, University of Peradeniya. Professor Kulasurya, you have over 50 years of experience in this industry now. You came in the year 1971 after finishing your PhD from London, and today you have done a lot of research work in the area of fertilizer and so on and so forth. However, you issue a note of caution on the importation of organic fertilizer to Sri Lanka recently. What was the thinking that went behind when you issued this statement in question?
First of all, I would like to explain soil fertility and fertilizers, because in this country we have been using synthetic chemical fertilizers, mostly imported from outside, for the last 60 years, starting from 1959, and that is 6 decades. So the farmers in particular and the public in general, I would say, always think soil fertility is NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, chemicals, and that's it, which is not correct. Soil fertility is defined as the overall ability of a soil to provide adequate nutrients and also all the other factors, including anchorage, to grow healthily and produce a good yield. That is, soil fertility is a much bigger, much wider thing than simply 3 chemicals, NPK and other micronutrients, what have you. So soil fertility, particularly the topsoil of soil, should be aerobic to a certain extent, because the roots underneath the soil are also breathing. They need air. They need space to grow. They also need certain amount of moisture. They need a favorable temperature as well as a favorable acidity, which in scientific terms people call pH. It's acidity or alkalinity. Too much of acid, too much of alkaline is also not suitable, close to neutral. So there are so many factors, including the soil organisms, earthworms, various insects. They are also part and parcel of a live soil. It is a live soil that provides fertility and that enables plants to grow healthy. And then what has happened over time in Sri Lanka can be seen in this figure, because this is data coming from the Government Department of Census and Statistics, covering the national rice yield from 1959 to 2020. 1959-60 was the year that chemical fertilizers, hybrid varieties of rice and other agrochemicals were introduced to Sri Lanka under the Green Revolution. At that time, our national average yield had been only 1.5 tons per hectare, which is low. Okay, but the population was also small, and with a little bit of imports, I believe, we were able to provide enough rice for the people to consume. Then, with the introduction of hybrid varieties as well as the chemicals, the rice yields up to 1989-90 Maha increased dramatically, more than doubled. From 1.5 it went up to 3.5, more than double. Why? Because chemical fertilizers were added to soils that had a lot of organic matter collected or accumulated over centuries of organic agriculture. So the chemicals added were retained effectively by the colloidal moiety of the colloidal nature of the organic matter. It also retained certain moisture, and most importantly, it was full of microorganisms nurtured by the organic matter, and they were very active. They could convert the chemicals added very effectively to be absorbed by the plants. That was the reason, the overall soil fertility was the reason that dramatic increase. But it didn't continue. The dramatic increase did not continue. It started leveling off by 1989-90, and until 2005 the increase was only 7 kilograms.
Right. So, just to get some clarity, Professor Kulusurya, so what you're trying to say is the continuing use of chemical fertilizer is not the answer to the problem that Sri Lanka is facing at the moment.
Exactly.
In terms of soil fertility.
Yeah.
But we have a bigger problem that we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
Farmers are on the streets right now protesting against the government's move to ban the importation of chemical fertilizer. Many groups have already voiced their concerns that the government took a haphazard decision to ban the importation of chemical fertilizer. Given all this, even you, Professor Kulusurya, issued a statement to the government, a note of caution, and you say in this note of caution, please do not hold us to account if a disaster happens by bringing in foreign organic fertilizers, ignoring the warning given in this note of caution, unquote. This is not my paper, Professor Kulusurya. This is what you said.
Very relevant, very important questions. You posed two questions. One was about the importation of organic fertilizer, but the other one was about complete ban on chemical fertilizers. Now, those were two extreme situations. I would not advocate a complete ban. I would think a judicious combination, because even here the chemicals added has to be retained. That is why from 2006 to 2020, for 14 years, despite the fact they have been continuously adding chemical fertilizers, particularly urea, NPK, there had been no increase in yield.
Right.
It's a plateau, fluctuating around 4.2 tons. Even today our national average is around 4.2, 4.3 tons.
But do you agree, Professor Kulusurya, the government did the wrong move when they announced a complete ban on the importation of chemical fertilizer to the country?
Complete ban is a mistake.
Right.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Professor. We'll get back to you momentarily.
Complete ban is a mistake.
I now move my attention to Professor Roshan Pereira, Professor of Chemistry and Biochemistry, former Professor of Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry, the University of Texas, USA. Professor Roshan, today marked a significant day as far as the fertilizer crisis in Sri Lanka is concerned. We heard President Gotabaya Rajapaksa reiterating that green agriculture continues to be the government's agricultural policy, and he says instructs authorities to permit the private sector to import chemical fertilizer based on the necessity for cultivations including vegetables, maize and greens. And the president stresses that during the meeting that neither the chemical fertilizer nor any other agrochemical will be distributed through the government's subsidy scheme. Professor Roshan, we are facing a crisis at the moment in Sri Lanka. Look at the prices of vegetables at the moment. It has skyrocketed. If the government fails to provide the subsidy for urea to be imported to Sri Lanka, we were discussing that urea prices have gone up by 3-fold in the international market. If the government fails to provide the subsidy required to bring down chemical fertilizer to the country, what a daring effect is it going to have on the production in Sri Lanka in the next few weeks, next few months? Would the people even have food to eat? The time starts now.
It's a very good question. I think this has two aspects. We have to think about the world market. It's not something actually we can change. We have to worry about the local production. And do we have the right technology to do that production in Sri Lanka? I'm talking about the fertilizer. So now when you actually think about the local production of fertilizer, we are not ready to produce the chemical fertilizer. So then what are the other solutions we have in there? So what we have done in the past, actually we have formulated a think tank. We want to have brainstorming sessions to find out, are there good solutions in regards to organic agriculture that we can bring out a good solution for this problem. So we were thinking 6 months back, this problem when this complete ban was announced. Then the other issue is like at the moment, why we have not implemented the proper guidelines for the production of the fertilizer in Sri Lanka. So if we have done that 6 months back, I think we will not face this crisis today. So we are very unfortunate that we did not see this problem of urea prices going up in this scale in the world market, and also we have not calculated the post-COVID effect that has on any logistic transportation that we have, whether it's sea shipping or air shipping, it doesn't matter. You have all these problems accumulating into the price calculation, including the manufacturing cost increasing in China and other countries. So we have not calculated in that manner. So it is a mistake not to think about this problem at the beginning, and also how to bring the current research and in the form of technology to the production of fertilizer in Sri Lanka.
So Professor Roshan, are you telling me that despite the fact the government is now allowing chemical fertilizer to be brought through the private sector to the country, prices of vegetables will not come down in the short term?
Correct. That's the thing we have to actually accept. And also it is impossible for any economist to agree that you can pay 3 times more than what we were paying last year for this fertilizer now. So basically we have to find the indigenous solutions no matter what.
Professor, given the fact that this is the case right now, the government seemed to have won this battle. Why? They initially said on the 22nd of April 2021 that they are going to ban the importation of chemical fertilizer. There were many protests on the streets saying that the importation of chemical fertilizer should be allowed by the government. The government killed time, waited until the last minute. Now the urea prices are high by 3 folds in the world market. Now the government is saying, guess what, we are allowing the importation of chemical fertilizers through the private sector, but we won't give the subsidy. It's like teaching the farmers with a stick approach. Guess what? You are not in line. Now you have to pay the price. Isn't that what this is all about?
I think, in my opinion, it's a good question. Actually, I'm not economist, so but I can tell you one thing: no government at the moment can afford this pricing. The international market price is quite high, and are we having the proper mechanism in order to import even the chemical fertilizer is a good question, because can we afford them? This is a post-COVID effect, as I told you. This problem actually existed way before they decided this, and we knew everything's going to be priced up, since we have seen in the US or even in other countries how the market prices are going up for every commodities out there. So we can predict this very easily if you are economists, of course, but then again, as a scientist, from my point of view, is that we need to actually get the process, the fertilizer manufacturing process, streamlined immediately to avoid a crisis. Then you can be very cheap.
Now the opposition might think, Professor Roshan, they have won the battle, but actually the government has won the war of making sure that they keep their policy intact, and as a result of that, the prices will escalate. And now, not the farmers, the people will start coming to the streets to ask the government for some plight in terms of giving a subsidy for fertilizer. Having said that, we now move to Professor BFA Basnayaka, Emeritus Professor, Department of Agricultural Engineering, University of Peradeniya. Professor Basnayaka, interestingly, when the government announced this decision initially, I'm talking about the year before, when the government said in their election manifesto that they want to move towards organic fertilizer, it looked like a very noble cause. It seemed to have been done with a good intention, but suddenly the government comes up with this plan on the 22nd of April. Guess what? From tomorrow, no, we won't import chemical fertilizer to the country. Professor Kulasuri was of the view that there has to be a judicious combination of chemical fertilizer as well as organic fertilizer to address the issue which we are facing at present at the moment. In your opinion, what would have been going in the mind frame of the government, the president, when he came up with such a plan? Now you may say, Professor Basnayaka, I am not the government, nor am I the president. I cannot answer your question. But in your opinion, do you think the government should have been more proactive in its approach than being reactive? We are in this mess right now because of the government, aren't we?
Yes. Well, as you put it, it's a very difficult question to answer, in fact, because first of all, whenever we try to reduce the amount of fertilizer, right, say we are going to cut down 50% of fertilizer, what will happen? Immediately people would jack the prices up. They will store it. You saw what happened. You know, it was not possible to reduce little by little, right? Of course, they didn't consult us. We had the answers to do that. You see, I'll come to the point straight away, because biochar, we did this research in 1994. We could cut down 70% of the of urea. So we had the answers, but we were not consulted.
Professor Basnayaka, you all also met the speaker on this very subject, and you all said that it is important to have a national action plan to make sure that you all introduce organic fertilizer in stages, and there seemed to have been no opposition to the thoughts that you all brought forward with the speaker as well. Tell us a little bit about this National Action Plan that you all tabled with the speaker.
Yeah, we had a Zoom discussion, and it was very frank. We asked whether we could actually meet up with the opposition as well and make it into a national project and even bring about an act in Parliament. Then it would have been a different story. I think here again, because of the type of party politics that we are talking about, it's impossible to get to that level. So we need a lot of maturity, political maturity in the country to be able to have that level of understanding.
That will be until the cows come fly over the moon, Professor Basnayaka, to have that sort of maturity in Parliament. However, having said that, Professor, we are talking about a lot of terrorist activities across the world. We saw just a couple of years ago on the 21st of April in Sri Lanka, there was a terrorist attack as well. But now we have moved from that stage. We are now talking about bioterrorism. We are talking about cyber terrorism. We are talking about fertilizer terrorism as well. Now that is on the cards at the moment. When looking at the way in which the Chinese government has been pressing the Sri Lankan authorities to buy the fertilizer, organic fertilizer that is stuck off the coast of Sri Lanka, what alarms does it bring in your mindset?
As Professor Kulasurya quite rightly pointed out, we were not for bringing in any fertilizer. No organic fertilizer to be brought to Sri Lanka. That was our stand. Well, it's a lot more complicated than what we think right now, because if we produce a fertilizer, we have to go through a lot of testing. Can Professor?
No, I'll come back to that, Professor. But in your opinion, does it ring bells in terms of terrorism in the field of fertilizer? Is someone trying to destroy our fertilizer, the soil fertility in Sri Lanka? Does that ring any bells in your mindset? Or is it a far-fetched thinking only?
They were just trying to find an alternate and a quick solution.
Right. I now move my attention to, thank you very much, Professor Basnayaka. I want to move my attention now to Professor Gamini Seniratne, Senior Research Professor, National Institute of Fundamental Studies. Professor Gamini Seniratne, there was big ha-ho today about the importation of, the lifting of the ban that has been put on the importation of chemical fertilizer. But little does the government realize that they did bring down non-organic fertilizer on the 4th of November 2021, when 2 Indian Air Force planes carrying 100 tons of nano-nitrogen liquid fertilizers landed in Colombo. So what came from India is not 100% organic. Am I right to come to that assumption?
Not 100% organic. It's a kind of organic, I can say.
Kind of organic, but not 100% organic.
Because nano-urea, it's basically the urea molecule is organic.
Right.
CONH2. But when it's nano, it's a,
Particle size.
Particle size. Yeah, one could consider even organic in a way. Yeah.
What is this ha-ho about, Professor Gamini? Now, the government reversing its gears. We've seen how the government has reversed gears on a number of gazettes issued in Sri Lanka in the last few months. I don't want to even mention that because it's no point. It's a waste of time to even discuss about inconsistent policy that has plagued Sri Lanka over the last few months, last few years, unfortunately. But this decision that has been taken by the government, is it a welcoming move?
Yeah, for the time being, I think. That's a big issue in the country, as we all see. Rises rise in prices and all, there are. So as a sort of a temporary measure, it's a good move, I think. But we have to have a long-term plan for this conversion from chemical to organic. For that, as Professor Basnayaka said, we have been testing products which are organic, which can also be used together with reduced quantities of, amounts of chemical fertilizers or 100% organic, both we can use. So those should be the long-term plans which should be sort of researched further and introduced to the farmer. Therefore, this cannot be converted one day.
Professor Siniratna, we seem to be, as a nation, taking knee-jerk decisions when a problem arises. Do you think the decision that was taken today by the President to import chemical fertilizer is also a very short-term move and not a long-term decision?
I think so. It's at the beginning, the President announced that the entire country should go towards organic. That's the basic framework, the basis of this whole story. But now they have realized that due to this rise in price of the commodity, the products produced that have been, especially the vegetables and others, we have to have a short-term solution to sort of reduce the prices to some extent, and then at the same time we can continue this organic move with whatever the resources, because in Sri Lanka there are so many organic products that have been developed within the country and which have gone internationally. I'll explain them later.
Yeah. Professor Ratna, however, you're saying that the prices may reduce, but Professor Roshan, speaking to responding to one of my earlier questions, said because urea has gone up by 3 times in the world market, without a subsidy from the government, the prices will not come down.
Oh, if government is not going to introduce a subsidy, there's an issue, because due to rise in price in urea in the recent past, as Professor Roshan mentioned, there's an issue. That's right.
So, what does it leave the general public who are watching the show tonight? What is left for them to do? They've been waiting. You go to a vegetable supermarket now, Professor Nivratna, I think even yourself will probably go to the market and realize how prices of vegetables have skyrocketed.
That's true.
A layman can't afford to give vegetables anymore to their children because the prices are so high.
Yeah.
You go to the supermarket, you try to buy vegetables for 2,000 rupees, you can't even buy 3 kilos of vegetables now in the market for 2,000 rupees. The prices are so high. What can the people do? Why are the people being penalized for the government's ad hoc decisions?
I think this question has to be answered from the people who sort of decided on this.
No, because Professor, there were 6.9 million people who voted this government in. But now when you go to the road and ask who voted for the government, absolutely no one is raising their hands.
Yep.
Is that the same case in the fraternity of academics also?
Yeah. That's a very difficult question for me to answer. It's too much political, I would say.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your thoughts. We have 4 academics today on the show. Professor Anand Kulusurya, Professor Gamini Seniratna, Professor Roshan Pereira, as well as Professor BFA Basnayaka joining us this evening on the show tonight to discuss about Sri Lanka's fertilizer crisis. Seems that the government has won the war and the opposition has won just a battle. There seems to be problems cropping up in the sector of vegetable prices and also urea being imported to the country without a government subsidy scheme, meaning prices will escalate, putting further putting Sri Lankan people to a further abyss. I open the floor for questions from our journalists. Onto my immediate right is Nadeem Majid. Onto my immediate left is Tarusha. Let's start off with Tarusha.
Thanks, Shamir. I would like to pose my first question to Professor Basnaika now. As the youngest of the two panelists here, if someone says that government has not taken any steps to resolve this crisis, I wouldn't agree with that. The question is whether the government has taken the correct steps. And, several things comes to our mind. Shamir mentioned about the Chinese ship carrying fertilizer roaming around the Sea of Sri Lanka, and the nano-nitrogen fertilizer imported from India. Now, there are debates whether there is any fraudulent acts or there are any corruption involved in the importation of nano-nitrogen liquid fertilizer from India. My question to you is corruption the root cause to this problem?
Well, I'm not an expert on this aspect of it. For instance, as I pointed out before, we cannot bring anything without doing extensive field tests. That is our mandate. You look at the regulations pertaining to quarantine regulations, it won't allow you to bring anything without doing field tests. It's a long-term studies that you need to do. In fact, even the urea, people think that it is there's no issues with the urea. There's heavy metal in the urea, right? We had not done systematic studies about that as well. You see? So the Department of Agriculture, I don't want to, most of them are my students, right? And I don't want to create an issue, you see? But the reality is we should basically follow rules and regulations. Simple as that.
Are they taking any wise decisions, Professor, at the moment? Because the Director General of Department of Agriculture said that urea can be applied to your skin as well. Therefore, it is not hazardous. Are they making sound-mind decisions?
Depending on how you make the urea. If it is made from naphtha, which is the cheaper, all right, would have cadmium and arsenic and all of it. Even 1% is significant, because when it is uptaken directly from the plant, it goes to the grain, and those structures are very different. Organometallic structure, you see, is very different from urea that is normally made, naturally made in the soil.
But the urea that is in Sri Lanka, I don't know what the Director General of Director General of the Agriculture Ministry was referring to, Tarusha, but when you use urea in your bare hands, there is a sensation of burning that takes place.
Yeah.
Am I not correct?
Yeah.
Because I have used urea for my garden, and I have noticed that there is a burning sensation when you use urea as well, right,
And
Professor Basnaik?
yes, and nanoparticles are terrible. It goes through the skin, right?
Professor Basnaik, I think when it comes to the dangers of not just chemical fertilizer, but also people talk about the need for greater education amongst farmers, even on the use of pesticides and weedicides. And it's not just in agriculture, across all different sectors, when it comes to like the health concerns, levels of heavy metals in water, like levels of lead in water. There have been questions about Sri Lanka's drinking water quality as well. My question, though, has more to do with this. We are a country that has growing inequality amongst the socioeconomic classes. We are a country where UNICEF has identified as having problems with childhood undernourishment and stunting and wasting. In that kind of context, you need to be able to provide your children with nutritious food and a diverse and balanced diet, which includes vegetables, which you can't give right now. We know a lot of very poor families, those in abject poverty. Feeding children, for example, now happens just to like satiate the hunger, and there's no real concern about nutrition anymore. Given the pandemic and the loss of incomes, that has been limited further to sometimes 1 meal a day. Why is the government toying around with the food security of this country by making such knee-jerk decisions at a time like this? What madness prompted this decision to, several months ago, last year, to completely ban the import of fertilizer? Because it appears that, according to Professor Kulasuriya's cautionary note, at least, or note of caution, that this wasn't a recommendation of the Presidential Task Force for a Green Sri Lanka. So who was it that made the recommendation? What prompted this almost blatantly irresponsible policy decision? Who is advising the government on these things if it's not the intelligentsia and the academics?
Well, I think to a great extent the medical aspect of it had a very big bearing, right? And I can later on show you that some of the results are being misinterpreted, not correctly interpreted. And we could have actually isolated, if we had done the research properly or interpreted the findings, then we could have said in those areas we go for organic, right? And then it would have been a solution.
So, Professor Basa, you're suggesting that it's a conflict between the doctors of medicine and the doctors of agriculture.
Yes, yeah. Because the doctors of agriculture, they didn't have there was a knowledge gap in them, all right? Which to a great extent it continues, that knowledge gap.
So the doctors of medicine are stepping into the field of agriculture as well?
Well, because of the fact that they have to have some answers, right? It's like the COVID situation, you know, when the doctors say, you take the precautionary principle, you see? So we cannot say it is wrong, because precautionary principle we agreed in 1992, right? When it comes to environmental issues. So that again, all of us should have got together and said, okay, we isolate this area and we do all the experiments that are necessary.
But Professor Basnagar, now I recall even under the previous administration, during the Apalna administration, I think it was under the Strategic Enterprise Management Agency that a pilot project was conducted in the Digamadula district in Ampara, and it was amongst soybean farmers. I think this was a pet project of Venerable Aturali Ratana Thera. And if I'm not mistaken, that pilot project did show a drop in yields when they stopped using the plant nutrients and focused instead on soil. Obviously, I'm not sure what the long-term impact is, but again, it brings back this question: why is Sri Lanka specifically, being used as, around the world there is general consensus and agreement that, you know, organic is better for the soil and is better for you. But when you're talking about a country where we do have these issues that doctors of medicine also should be worried about stunting, wasting, malnutrition, and then on the other hand we also have, you know, the long-term issues like what you were talking about, chronic kidney disease and carcinogens, etc. When we do have this sort of problem, why is it that Sri Lanka is the guinea pig for this project? Why Sri Lanka? No other country in the world is targeting 100% agriculture.
I think Sri Lanka very blindly went along all the way through with the Monsanto concept of agriculture. Let's face it.
At the beginning.
See? So it was very tough on everything, including the universities going totally on that line. You know, so we became more or less, even they feel, made it a point to show that Sri Lanka was a model for utilizing the fertilizer and pesticides and everything. You see?
So we are the guinea pigs of both the organic lobby and the chemical lobby.
Well, we can't say organic in the sense, because of the fact that people did not understand it. What is organic? As I said, there's that knowledge gap.
Professor Kulasurya, in your note of caution, you've regarding this the importation of organic fertilizer, not just from China, but you've spoken of the need to exercise caution when importing, or basically saying do not import, better to manufacture here, where you have control over the use of the raw materials. You identified several issues like the type of kelp and where it's grown and how that can also contaminate. My question to you is on this. Now, right now, the government is engaged in discussions, we are informed, or reliably informed, to not only compensate the Chinese company for the fertilizer based on the claim that they have made. I think there's been an expression of willingness to pay 75% of the claim and to order more. Why are they ordering more?
Thank you for asking that question, because from the very beginning, as a professor of microbiology, I have been very strongly against the import of organic matter, organic fertilizers from any country, whether it is China, India, Norway, USA, Canada, doesn't matter. The reason is that invariably when you bring in any organic material from a foreign country, we are bringing in foreign microorganisms. And microorganisms cannot be seen with the unaided eye. Unlike invasive plants like giant mimosa or parthenium, you can see them. Here you can't see them. And the danger is, Sri Lanka had a record by late 1950s. Our tiny island was the only country in Asia that completely got rid of contagious diseases like diphtheria, whooping cough, smallpox, polio, and so on. All our neighboring countries have this even today. Now, with that kind of clean record, thanks to the health department activities at that time, we are now going to bring in organic matter which contains organisms. Some may be harmless, but very likely there could be pathogens, and we are unable to. We were very lucky that our quarantine was able to detect in the first samples itself this Erwinia carotinova and also coliforms. Coliforms means bacteria associated with fecal matter. So that danger is there, and before that, I think one of your colleagues pointed out, bioterrorism is there all the time in all countries. So, but on the other hand, I also would like to take this opportunity to bring out something that we ourselves, through our research, have brought in. Now we are talking of organic fertilizer and mineral fertilizer, whether they are synthetic or natural, but we don't talk of biofertilizers. That's a third category, which most people in this country at least are not quite familiar with. They are different from all the other fertilizers. Biofertilizers are living organisms, living inoculants that provide nutrients to plants from external substrates. That's different from all the other fertilizers. All the other fertilizers themselves act as substrates from which the plants absorb nutrients. Take nitrogen fixing organisms. Now, the organism itself is a catalyst, but the substrate is air. Air contains 78% of nitrogen. That's the highest amount of gas in the atmosphere. And that 78% of nitrogen you and I can't
So are
assimilate.
these biofertilizers that you're talking, which incorporate living
biofertilizers
organisms, are they in widespread use?
They are
anywhere in the
living.
world?
They continue to live in close association with the targeted plant and provide nutrients from external substrate.
Yeah.
And
Professor,
we-
my question is, are these biofertilizers in use, or is it a theoretical concept?
They are not at all theoretical.
It is in practice. It's being-
Biological nitrogen fixing organisms have been applied the world over for the last 125 years.
So it is being
first
used in
patent-
commercial agriculture.
The first patent
already.
for nitrogen fixing biofertilizer was registered in America in 1896.
Has it been scaled commercially? Is my question. Like, is it being used in commercial
Today,
agriculture?
2005, Australia reported that they are saving $3 billion a year by using nitrogen fixing organisms in the agriculture, because it's a livestock country, livestock food. Plus, we import 40% of our mung beans from Australia. They are all grown with biofertilizer. And I, for myself, have been working on biofertilizers for the last nearly more than 25 years. And we are in a position to supply today biofertilizer, nitrogen fixing biofertilizers for soybean, mung bean, cowpea, vegetable bean, groundnut. Just last month, that's when the yellow season started, we got orders from different sources for our biofertilizers, which we produce and market now.
So why is it then that the government is
and
so gung-ho on getting this Chinese
half
seaweed
of
fertilizer?
those orders came from the central and provincial departments of agriculture. They have now realized the value, and they say there's no need to duplicate because your products are working, they are good, and we buy from them. They buy from us and give it to the farmers.
Professor Gamini, my question to you is actually a little bit different, not entirely just focused on agriculture, but I want to ask a few questions regarding the role of the National Institute of Fundamental Studies. Now, Sri Lanka has within like structure of like intelligentsia and academics, like organizations have been there are departments like the Industrial Research Institute, the Medical Research Institute, the Paddy Research Board, tea, rubber, coconuts. There is Department of Agricultural Engineering. So there are people, the intelligentsia, where the intelligentsia of the country, the academics are supposed to gather, conduct research and inform policy. When in your role currently as a senior research professor at the National Institute of Fundamental Studies as well, do you see this happening in Sri Lanka, where these bodies and departments that have been established, that have been chartered by the state, with the specific mission of conducting the R&D and the research necessary to inform public policy, is it happening?
Right.
Or is it just, or is the arbitrary policy decisions being caused as a result of arbitrary arbitrary research?
No, the first question you asked about was our institute, National Institute of Fundamental Studies, which is situated in Hamtana, Kandy. So this institute was established in 1981 with the aim of sort of doing fundamental research or basic research. When we say basic research, what we do is we study the basic concepts of all sciences: chemistry, physics, biology, and so on. So straight away, if I'm coming to my example in my division, now when we were doing research, I mean studying different things in early 2000. We were studying the effect of, say, polyphenols on rhizobia, which are nitrogen fixing, that Professor Kolusuri also mentioned. We did something else, but when we were doing the experiment, we found that there are a nice sort of a combination of this nitrogen fixing bacterium and a non-pathogenic fungus. They were interacting. So it's like the discovery of penicillium by Sir Alexander Fleming. So he also observed something similar, but it was a negative interaction. One organism suppresses the other one. Here we observed the interaction, nice interaction, what we call synergism or cooperation. So what we found was, so that is basic research. When we observe something, we are starting to think about the basis or the principle or whatever the thing behind that.
Does this research contribute to public policy is my question.
That's right.
It does.
Right. Then what we did was, once we observed this, we researched it further and we studied it to see if we can use it for something, for the agriculture or something for good, agriculture or environment. Now in this case, we found that this can be very nicely used for agriculture to increase the what we call fertilizer use efficiency in agriculture. So we did a lot of experiments for the last almost 20 years.
So Professor, does this inform, so for example now, what's the process beyond that? So I'm guessing the Institute of Fundamental Studies comes under the Ministry of Science and Technology and Research. So when you're conducting your research, after you've made your discoveries, you worked in conjunction with other departments. This is my question now. It's not just the Institute of Fundamental Studies, but even with other institutions that are intended for this purpose. Slintech has a slightly different model, but if you take like the Industrial Technology Institute, the Medical Research Institute, Institute of Fundamental Studies, the various agricultural research and development institutions, where is it that they contribute to public policy? Because it looks to me like, okay, you've spent 20 years conducting research and formulating like patents and plans, and then eventually the policy itself, the policy decision is based on not on your decades of research and development, but on whim and fancy. Isn't that the case?
Yeah, that's this is something, I mean, it's a conflict between science and the policies. Yeah, I should say.
So anyway, Professor Roshan, you've been involved with technology a lot in terms of developing organic fertilizer across the board. Tell me, what is the price of manufacturing a kilogram of organic fertilizer to that of urea? Is it cost effective?
So before I answer that question, can I explain, generally what we want to manufacture as a group of scientists here?
Right,
actually,
okay.
What we did 6 months back, we got together, we brainstorm to see whether we can come up with a good solution for this organic fertilizer issue. Issue in the sense that, we want to make sure you have the higher growth, and we want to make sure traditional composting process is too long. It takes about 2 to 3 months to make the compost. So we want to have fast composting accelerators so that we can actually accelerate the process. And we want to make it within 10 to 14 days, making sure that we will produce large quantum of fertilizer within a short period of time with a efficacy, basically with a much higher efficacy to have a higher yield, and also quality of the product, meaning the produce that we have from the agriculture will be in high quality. So those questions were addressed and we came up with a formula. What's the formula? So basically we looked at all the biomass availability in the country and we found out we have enough biomass. So that's not a problem. And then second question was, now Professor Kulasuriya and also Professor Gamini mentioned about biofertilizer, which is actually has a bio component of it. So we actually identified the soil microbiome in Sri Lanka, and we have isolated many microbes that are capable of doing a lot of good science. What do you mean by good science? Actually, it is the science that actually we cannot perform in a laboratory. You asked me to do, maybe prepare chemical fertilizer based on NPK. It's quite easy in a laboratory. But when you go into the phytochemistry and also secondary metabolites based on the plant secondary metabolites, these are very hard to prepare. Why is that? Because these are very complex molecules. Then which organisms can do this? That's where the biofertilizer term is quite important. So then we want to use these microbes to carry out this plant secondary metabolites production.
Yeah.
And then we actually address that issue, and also the other problem is the higher yield, as I mentioned. So to come to that point, then you need the biostimulants. So these biostimulants will make sure it will not utilize so much fertilizer from the soil, but it will make sure it will have the right composition to produce a higher yield.
So in terms of cost, what is more cost effective?
Again, now what we have observed with this current trend of chemical fertilizer prices going up, actually it is about 20 to 30% to use the organic fertilizer with highest quality. I mean, what we have done, actually we have made fertilizer beads out of it with.
But if that's the case, Professor Rohan, when you go to a supermarket, look at the prices of organic organic produce.
As I mentioned
very
earlier,
expensive.
Okay, from our part, what we did was, like for example, I advocate Palwatha sugar as well as the Savanagala to produce this in mass scale. They have, I would say, byproducts coming out of sugar industry that are polluting the environment. So we want to convert them as raw materials. So I advised them, let me develop a fertilizer based on your sludges that are coming out of sugar factories. So basically these sugar effluent, I mean if you look at the volume, it's about 350 metric tons from Palwatha alone. So then why we are not using it as a base to culture our microbes and making sure we produce most of this chemistry I was talking about, secondary metabolites, and then use them as a fertilizer source for our composting material, which is basically biomass based, to induce or inoculate the proper microorganisms to do the chemistry also. So we have done that.
Let's talk about Professor Rohan, the storage capacity.
Yes.
Because we've had panelists coming on the show saying there are logistical issues that may crop up as a result of getting organic fertilizer to play in crops or in fields. In your opinion, how do you view this?
Actually, that was at the beginning, and then as a group of scientists, we got together, and what we came up was actually about 500 kilogram is sufficient to do a 1 hectare of cultivation. So we came up with that
500 kilograms of
fertilizer. That means
organic fertilizer is enough to cultivate for 1 hectare.
1 hectare.
If it's a chemical fertilizer or urea that is being used, how much must you use?
That varies. That varies depending on the crop you're using and also the volume
let's
they are
say
applying.
for the same crop that we're talking about.
Now, again, can I explain, like, these are two different worlds. But what we are actually...
No, but just to, for the people to get an understanding, because we have to start matching from apple to apple, not from apple to oranges. So
I agree.
If it's 500 kilograms of... you all use 500 kilograms of organic fertilizer, 1 hectare of paddy crops, so what's the cultivation?
Paddy, as well as we can do it with the tea as well.
Right, so let's take for an example paddy cultivation. So if that case be the scenario, how much of chemical fertilizer or urea application for this hectare of land?
So it depends again, for the tea, for example, I think...
No, let's say paddy for an example, because you are saying paddy.
I think Professor Gamini can answer that.
I've been doing paddies. Now, the department has recommended 136 kilogram of nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium per acre. Right?
Okay.
Per acre.
Per acre.
But per hectare?
Per hectare it's 2.5 times.
Yeah.
Right?
So roughly about 400 kilos.
So roughly about 400 kilos. So urea, how much?
Urea, there we have about 90 kilograms of urea.
So 90
in that.
kilos. So there is definitely a logistical problem also in this whole process of organic fertilizer. If we are going to go 100% organic, there is also an issue with regard to logistics also, isn't it, Professor Rohan?
No, actually, it's almost the same as Professor Gamini mentioned. You know, the
90
volume
kilograms to 400 kilograms. That's a
It's only urea plus potassium phosphate,
Right.
which adds up to about 136 kilograms.
So again, 136 kilograms against 400 kilograms is, for an ordinary farmer, he wouldn't have space to keep this organic
No,
fertilizer.
that's per acre, and then you have to multiply again and get the 400 kilos. So
Per acre, the organic fertilizer quantity required is 200 kilograms. 200.
Okay. Okay. So I just want to touch a little bit about this particular paper that was done by Professor Basnaika. Professor Basnaika, you have done a research experiences of biochar production and applications for sustainable agriculture productions. Am I right?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So in the ending, as a conclusion, you say that you all did a pot experiment and grew tomatoes, and the mixed treatment of 70% of biochar and 30% recommended fertilizer gave highest yields, followed by developed organic fertilizers and then recommended fertilizers, and finally the control. And then you say it is conclusive that biochar mixed with or added to during the growing season of any proven organic fertilizer ensures healthy conditions for initial plant propagation while enhancing yield for sustainable agriculture productions. What do you mean by this? Because at the end of the day, what we have to look at is sustainable agriculture in the future as well.
Yeah.
So you are trying to touch on that in your research paper. What do you mean by this? If it's a pot experiment that you have done, that means this has not been used industrially. Am I correct, Professor Basnaika?
Yeah, we did number of experiments.
Right.
Pot experiment was one of them. This was done by one of the master students. I think we did pot experiments also for paddy. In that we actually can get all the leaching and all of the mass balances when you do a pot experiment, right? And then we compare that to the field. So what we found was we can cut down 70% urea application, and also with the biochar there are a lot more things that are happening actually.
Yeah, so one of the allegations leveled by the farming community in Sri Lanka, Professor Basnagi, is the fact that academics do not know what industrial farming is all about, and hence they come up with proposals that are not effectively made a reality. How do you counter these allegations?
Well, it's not. It's always the industries who didn't want to take it, right? Because we had done in large scale. A PhD thesis was done, right? In large scale applications.
What's the area that you all took into account, Professor Basnaika?
In paddy cultivation, Dr. Asoka Gamage, she did her entire thesis on this subject. So it is available for everyone.
Right. So, Professor, I want to turn your attention to Zurich, Switzerland, to 13th of June 2021. Interestingly, Swiss voters reject proposal to ban synthetic pesticides, citing that prices will go up and there will be a lower yield in production. However, Sri Lanka goes ahead and creates this mess when countries like Switzerland even decides that they should not ban the application of pesticides in their crops.
with the application of pesticides, there are so many aspects to it. First of all, if we have a biofertilizer, then the applications are less because the plant is more healthy. And then we do need to incorporate integrated pest management program into the organic agriculture, which we didn't do. Now, it was very early, I think about in year 2000 somewhere there, that the IPM program was started, and they scrapped it, or the companies made sure that they didn't continue the IPM program to be able to sell the pesticides, weedicides. You see?
Because the problem in Sri Lanka, Professor, if you look at in 2017, this is not the first time the government had tried to ban fertilizer application to crops. In 2016 or 17, if my memory serves right, there was a ban on glyphosate by the government. Now this resulted in the tea industry almost on the verge of losing the Japanese market, because people were starting to apply weedicides to the tea crop, which was not conforming to the international standards. So we have that threat. If we do not go for something easier for the farmer to access, he or she might resort to alternatives that may really have a harmful effect in the crops in Sri Lanka or the soil in Sri Lanka. Won't that happen?
No, we have the biopesticides. All of that is available. You can ask Professor Kulasurya. That is not an issue today. If we really want to get the industries going, even today the industries are not putting any money into R&D, except for people like Professor Roshan, who put all of their funding into R&D. Can you see? None of the companies that was importing all of these went on to doing proper R&D work.
No, but there are government institutes, Professor Basnayaka. Let's take the rubber industry. There is a rubber research institute. Let's take the tea industry. There's a tea research institute, the TRI.
Yeah.
And these are actively working and spending a lot of money on R&D as well.
Yeah, but you can't do with inorganic fertilizer to do integrated pest management. It won't go in together.
No, but if you look at the budget, Professor, the government has allocated 5,000 rupees for weeding per hectare. Who is going to work for 5,000 rupees and do mechanical weeding in a hectare?
You're referring to the
budget.
Tea
Yes.
No,
overall, the government had given 5,000 rupees for weedicide removal in a cultivation. So this is applicable for tea. Yes, Professor.
Yeah, I can answer this. Actually, the solution that we have provided, we have also suggested the weedicide should be a part of biomass that should be utilized in the process of making compost. Yes. So once you make the compost, we have the microbes that can accelerate the composting process. So if you have done that, I think in that order, I think it would have been a very fruitful mechanism, because we are going to bring the biostimulants from the shoot of the plant, not the root. So the root is actually having some nutrient components, and then the stimulation will come from the leaves.
But so, all this, Professor Roshan, is well and good. It's good to hear. But the practicality of finding the solution is far from us at the moment.
No. Actually, we are producing currently about 100 acres per day amount of fertilizers with the biostimulants in there. We have seen the latest results. Actually, we get higher yields than even the chemical fertilizer.
So if that is the case, why did the Sri Lankan government go and import fertilizer from China?
Scaling up.
Scaling up process. So basically, as I mentioned, there are sludges which you can use for this purpose.
That is not fair, no, Professor Roshan. Now you all are saying at one point, we have the solution in Sri Lanka.
We have.
And then you say, because the government want to scale up this operation, they are bringing down fertilizer from China or any other country. Let's put China to a side to the moment, will you? That is also not, you all are not in favor. That also you all are saying, no, that can't be done. So until when must the government wait till you all scale up these operations and bring some justice?
So we have taken the initiative. And 3 months back, actually, when I proposed this to Lanka Sugar Company, they have taken the idea forward, and we are producing 10% of the current requirement in the country in that place with this new technology we have developed. In my supervision, I'm producing actually about 100 acres per day currently, and I'm planning to increase for 500 acres per day. Of course, we have a limited budget.
500 acres per day. Professor Roshan, is a very small drop in the ocean.
No, your question was, do we have the right technology, right mechanism to produce this? Yes, we do.
We have the right mechanism, right technology, but to scale up, we don't have that capability yet.
No, this is the scale up is up to the other institutions to carry out. See, we are scientists. As scientists, I think all of us have proven in the field trial level that this can be done.
But Professor Roshan, when you go to New Zealand or Australia, if they ask you questions, if you have been on a farmland in Sri Lanka, they will ask you to remove your shoes and enter the country. But Sri Lanka is importing organic fertilizer from China. After 3 failures of tests, now they are requesting for a 4th test to be done also. Isn't this a pity?
So that was done because we didn't have the sufficient quantity of organic fertilizer in this country.
So, but Professor, you all were against this. Now, Professor Kulusurya in his cautionary note is saying, do not bring down organic fertilizer from overseas. Right? Then all of you are of the opinion that organic fertilizer cannot be brought from overseas. It has to be a homegrown solution. Now, homegrown solution is well and good, but you all itself are saying here in this very show, the homegrown solution, we don't have the necessary capability to scale up.
No, we do have. It's the government should take the initiative to carry it out.
Now, as you mentioned,
yes, Professor.
Actually, the biochar is the basis.
Yes.
All right. Biochar, if you use now, for instance, without the biochar, you can't do agriculture. That we have found. Ferruginous soils, we have most of them are ferruginous soils, get locked because Professor Panabuk actually explained and published a paper in 1963 about this problem of phosphate, locked phosphate. The only way to unlock that is to use biochar, right? I won't go into the scientific too much of that. Simply, we badly need the biochar.
Are you trying to say, Professor Basnagar, phosphate is organic?
No, phosphate is in the soil.
Yeah,
our soils have already the phosphate. We don't need to put any more.
Right, okay.
We just have to put the biochar, and you get all of these free living microorganisms coming in and fixing the nitrogen from the atmosphere. If the scientists who have now developed all these biofertilizers are added together, we have got the solution. So that's what we are done
So
here.
the problem right now is, Professor Senivaratna, everything is in place, but the government is not listening.
Yes.
In a way. Now, this is the story. Now, as you said very clearly that till April last year, government took this decision. Before that,
April this year, yes.
April this year. Yeah. Before that, chemical fertilizers were promoted by giving subsidies and so on. So under such a circumstance, no any commercial people are going to invest money to scale this up if they are not given the assurance that government is going to. That was the delay that happened up to now. But now I'll tell my story. This is about the Biofilm Bio Fertilizer that I explained you. Started in early 2000 and now it's about 20 years. By now, actually we started testing it for paddy in 2005, and by 2018 we applied this Biofilm Bio Fertilizer by reducing the chemical fertilizer nitrogen, potassium and phosphorus in paddy cultivation by almost 50%. And the first case was tested in Ampara district, starting from 3,000 acres, right? By now we have sort of introduced it and tested and introduced it to about 100,000 acres of paddy cultivation in this country in about 7 districts. Now our commercial partner is now gradually scaling up this to a large extent because the government has given the assurance recently. So that was the
Professor
delay.
Seneviratne, it seems from what you're saying as well, the suggestion is that the reason why we needed to sort of stop the chemical fertilizer was so that there would be commercial interest redirected into organics. So the solution, then the policy, the decision that should have been taken then was to stop the subsidizing of chemical fertilizer, not to ban it outright. Because, for example, if you look at what the government actually ended up doing, which is banning the fertilizer, that's like saying, look, we need to stop using fossil fuels and embrace renewables. Therefore, we're going to ban fossil fuels. Instead, you can take the decision of, okay, I'm not going to ban fossil fuels, I'm going to stop subsidizing fossil fuels so that commercial interests will then direct themselves towards using renewables. This seems like, a backwards sort of decision that was taken.
When this government came to power, and also according to their mandate, what they said was they are going to convert the agriculture fully 100% organic by 2030. That is after 10 years.
Then why did the president decide to do it in 2021? I can do it in 1 year.
That I don't know.
Because as far as I know, Bhutan is the only other country who has embarked on an artificial,
views.
but still they are transitioning.
It's a long term, not long term, but it's a mid-term plan.
They readjusted the dates to 2030 now.
Yeah.
So our plan is to, especially because we can't produce biofertilizers commercially, our commercial partner is doing that. So their plan is to expand this use of this biofertilizer in 100% organic. We have specifics of a sort of organic package for this.
Professor, you spoke about using biofertilizer in paddy cultivations, and you spoke about the progress. What about the progress in using biofertilizer to corn and maize cultivations?
Yeah, there are. We have done all the researches, but the thing was, as I mentioned, there was a delay in taking the decision and promoting this and so on. So now, even in the past, before this decision, we have, for example, vegetables, including maize and other things. We have applied from 2015 to date about 30,000 acres of maize, not maize, vegetable plus tea.
What's the progress?
A bit of maize, yeah. Huh?
What's the progress? Is there any improvement?
No, there was a lot of issues. No, at that time, up to 2018, there was a big issue regarding this infestation by a
fall armyworm. Sena caterpillar.
No, I'm referring to tea. There was
the tea
beetle.
Yeah.
Infested the tea cultivation. Then TRI recommended that nothing can be applied which have not been recommended.
That was found in the Russian container, Professor Ratna.
That's right.
That was all. that is still very subjective, Professor. We banned asbestos to be imported from Russia to Sri Lanka. No, that's very political.
Yeah.
That's a political decision. I don't think there was
The beetle was actually there.
There are lots
a
of
microscopic
stories
beetle.
behind that.
Yeah, that seems to be a political decision. But let's talk about the glyphosate ban, for an example, Professor. There was an issue for the tea cultivation in Sri Lanka. The TRI was very silent on the matter until the Japanese buyers came to Sri Lanka personally, met the president, and then they decided, okay, the application of glyphosate in tea cultivation is allowed. What happened initially when they banned the importation of chemical fertilizer? They said it is bad for health, understood, no problem, let a decision be taken on that basis. They banned it for the application for rubber plantation as well. Now, rubber, do we eat, Professor Senirath?
Yeah, those are blind decisions, I should say.
No, so who are we to blame, Professor?
So those decisions were not taken by the scientists. Those are taken by...
No, but at least at one point, Professor Kulasuri, don't you think there has to be some knowledgeable people in the government? Now, Minister Mahindananda Alutgamage, he's saying that he's a farmer. Minister Sashendra Rajapaksa is the president's nephew. So when one of the most biggest industries in Sri Lanka, agriculture, where the farming community relies on at least 30% of our production is on agriculture, don't you think there has to be a shift in government policy thinking also?
No, this is unfortunate that quite a number of scientists in Sri Lanka have been engaged in within their capacities to find alternatives to these problems, and to some extent all of us here have found some solutions, but you can't expect the scientists to convert that solution into a mass scale thing. Either the government or a private sector entrepreneur should join. Gamini was fortunate that his biofilm biofertilizer technology was taken up by Nature's Creations. Similarly, there is another group now on an entrepreneur who consults me, Sarabhumi Lanka, operating from Kundasale. They have got even a laboratory within them. They have got 4 scientists, 1 PhD and 3 MPhils working for them. They have developed biofungicides, biopesticides, including for fall armyworm, and also nematicides. They are available now in the market, and the National Fertilizer Secretariat has registered them. The Department of Agriculture has given them certificates. So they have started small. It is happening, but it might take some time. This is why I started off saying that this immediate change, kind of overnight change, was a bit of a mistake. Should have allowed some time. And like many other countries, this country also would have gone into a balanced
judicious combination of
balanced approach of retaining and sustaining soil fertility, not just fertilizers.
But the problem is, Professor Kulasuri, now we can't find anyone accountable. Now there are so many owners, there are no owners in the government to this problem.
Yeah, but the thing is that that's the case with not only with fertilizer problem. No, you take any problem, when something goes wrong, nobody takes responsibility in this country. That's a general thing.
Now see, now I just want to take your attention, Professor Kulasuri, to the President's statement today. He is saying, I made my statement. Now you must decide. Right? And then he says, you must decide the status of vegetables and maize cultivations. We must provide it for the season. Now he is saying, he is holding almost a gun to the authorities' head, saying, I have now made my choice. Now make sure by hook or by crook, you grow these vegetables and give it to the consumer at the end of the day. No accountability now, Professor Kulasuri.
No, I mean, a president can make statements, but it is the others who have to implement them. And what we say as collectively as scientists, we have certain solutions, but we need the support to implement that solutions, and the faster we get the support, the earlier we can go into this change.
Now, Professor, if you look at this entire process, it seems that the government has taken the right decision. They appoint 2 committees to study this proposal this year. The committee was headed by the Vice Chancellor of the Vijayambi University and the current Secretary to the Ministry of Agriculture, Senior Agriculture, Professor Udit Jayasinghe.
Yeah.
The other committee was headed by the Secretary to the Ministry of Agriculture at that time, Rohana Pushpakumara. So the government appointed committees. Now this boils down to the question that Nadeem posed before. There are policy directions, there are scientists who has to take decisions, but what is the point of having institutes like the National Fundamental Studies, which has a bigger say in matters of this sort, and if the government is not listening to them? Professor Kulusurya, what is the point? It's far more better to close down such an operation and make sure that Professor Gamini and Professor Roshan work for the private sector. It probably will be more lucrative, Professor Gamini.
No, what we see is now government is listening little by little. That's why we have now gone up to 100,000 acres.
Yeah, but after testing and trying, after putting the people on the streets, making sure COVID spreads, when then there's opposition that goes onto the streets and protesting against the government, all these problems after the government decides to listen to the people who are the learned gentlemen in this country.
Yeah, that those who are making the policies and so on will have to.
Professor Roshan must be thinking, not even in the US things of this sort happen, you know.
Yeah,
being in Texas, USA for some time and learning about agriculture and all that. No.
See, I think in Sri Lanka the biggest problem is ignorance. I think when you have ignorance to scientific methodologies, you are facing these problems. I think it's time for us to do a course correction. I think it is time for Sri Lanka to realize it's everybody's sake. You know, we have to go for science and then get our bearings right, and then only actually we can, as a country, we can develop this country. Because, you know, we can talk about all these mistakes as a nation we are doing. I mean, I think it's with everybody in Sri Lanka, in my opinion. So, unfortunately,
respective governments, Professor Roshan, you are absolutely correct. Respective governments have always put the consumer and the people at stake.
Correct.
And this probably is one of the countries in the world where the politicians are richer than the people. So in every deal, as Tarusha mentioned before, now there is discussions about the importation of Indian nano fertilizer. Also, there is a corruption scandal there. So very unfortunate, isn't it, Professor Basnaik? Sitting as an academic and looking at how things are unfolding in Sri Lanka, what do you think, Professor Basnaik? Sometimes when you are at home, thinking about the way forward for a country like this little nation, this resplendent island, Sri Lanka, what goes in your mind, Professor Basnaik?
Missed opportunities, actually. Because my faculty, my university did not quite comprehend the role that we could play so that transparency would be there. You see, now universities can play a major role. Now we gave a very good proposal on productivity-based higher education. You see, so when you have that in the context where we actually have to perform and get the farmer together with the university, and all of this is moving together, we actually expose what the current situations are, so that we as a whole group of people can govern the system. Because if as at present it is the Department of Agriculture or the ministry or whatever, they have to toe the line what the minister says. You see?
But Professor, this is a country, I don't know whether you recollect, in 2015, when the Yapalne government was appointed, they came up with a plan to appoint cabinet of ministers scientifically. Do you remember, Professor?
Yeah.
And the scientific way in which they appointed the Ministry of Higher Education was putting him in line with the Ministry of Highways. So that is the scientific ways in which these governments act.
Yeah.
And then this government came into power saying that they will appoint a cabinet of ministers scientifically, and then they started appointing people for onions and small crops and things like that.
Yeah. No, basically, I've been on waste management, right?
Right.
I mean, Ministry of Toilets or whatever you can call it. I think if we actually align ourselves and say, look, you can't be doing this, you know, and come up with, now, for instance, I wanted a green tribunal in this country. It never happened. You see? I have done work for India.
Who did you want to sit at the tribunal, Professor? This green tribunal that you were speaking of?
All the ministers and all of them, they don't like. You know, they would rather keep on going with the Center for whatever the to continue. A green tribunal is when we can actually solve problems.
Yes.
You know. We haven't got there yet.
No, but if the hierarchy, Professor Basna, you mentioned that we have the solution. That is what you told us earlier, right before we started the show. You said we have the solutions. They are just not listening to us. So who should listen to you?
First of all, the professionals. We must get together. Mm-hmm. You know, like here. All of us, we came from different, and we were put together, and we now know what to do. I'm very confident when they are there. Can you see? So this has to happen with all of the universities. You know, like Jaffna, we can't get them isolated, right? We must go and help them. We need to coordinate, and the universities are perfectly there to do the extension services. Today we don't have proper agriculture extension services. Like biochar, to produce biochar, we got all of the barrels, systems, we can even do power generation. I got proposal for a power generation of 100 megawatt, small power generations of 1.5 to 3 and so forth. That we can do. So we solve this problem of renewable energy, we solve the problem of the fertilizer, and enrich the farmer. Right? People are so scared when I talk about farmer cooperatives working. In Spain and everywhere, you get lovely ones. They're even making Airbus components. You see? Today we have to rethink, is this system, is it the best for Sri Lanka and the world? You look at tea has declined. I mean, yields have declined, the soils have deteriorated utilizing the fertilizer. You know, we didn't realize, or rather a lot of people didn't realize, but we saw it. You don't see the actual pollution taking place, right? When it is flooding, I mean huge rainfall, all of it goes into the downstream, all of that pollution. So what I now feel, and as the solution, give us the mandate, universities are there are very young ones, and they're queuing up to leave. My job is writing recommendation letters. You know, I spend at least one afternoon of a week doing recommendation letters for them to leave.
Very sad indeed, Professor Basnaik. You know, Tarusha started off the show tonight saying, I am the youngest in the midst of two journalists who are old, but we are not that old. We are not far from Tarusha's age. But even our generation at this age are contemplating to leave the country because there is no proper policy taken in Sri Lanka for the youth, the future prospects of this nation. Very unfortunate, isn't it, Professor Kulisuriya? You came back in 1971 from London thinking there is a glimmer of hope in the way in which Sri Lanka would act right after a PhD. What are your thoughts, Professor, when you look at things, when things are unfolding?
71, when the country was just recovering from the first insurrection, in fact, including my supervisor, quite a number of my colleagues in England asked me, Kule, why are you going back? The country is burning. You have enough opportunities here. I said, no, can't let the country burn. Even for the burning country, I must go back. That is my country. Anyway, that's besides the point. I want to make another comment on this. If we are going to implement organic fertilizer and organic agriculture, even to some extent, soil microbiology becomes a critical part, invaluable critical part of that. Up to date, the Department of Agriculture, which is mandated to ensure crop production and food security in this country, the department does not have a soil microbiologist. And that is a message I would like to convey to the government as well. So many years. How can you expect the department to understand the role of microorganisms, as all my colleagues have pointed out? All these biofertilizers are microbial, and we are talking of microbial pest control agents. And now it is understood in the world over, every plant root system is surrounded by a community of microorganisms called, they have termed it microbiomes. A microbiome is a community specialized with the root system of each and every plant. They provide nutrients, they also provide hormones to make the plant stronger, immune to infection. They also produce antibiotics which keep away soil-borne diseases. There's a conglomerate. So the tendency today is not to produce inoculants or biofertilizers with single organisms as we used to do traditionally. Now we are going in to prepare multimicrobial inoculants. So that's the research area which all of us can start if the government or even the private sector is interested, because eventually it has a lot of commercial value. But these are the directions, if anybody asks, which we can give. Now, of course, it's 15 years since I have retired, but I'm still trying to convey these messages and actually working. I retired from actually I was also a visiting professor at the National Institute of Fundamental Studies, working with Gamini, and I retired only end of last month because of my advanced age. But I am still prepared to contribute in whatever way possible, but we have very little opportunities that.
But the good thing is, the four professors who are in the panel today, the good thing is, even at this age, Professor Kulisuriya, Professor Basnaik, I think Professor Gamini and Professor Roshan may be a little bit more younger than the two learned gentlemen onto your right and immediate lefts. The good thing is, you all are ready to help. You all are ready to contribute. And that is what the government should seize at this moment. Get individuals in the caliber of the four gentlemen who are in front of me today. get them involved, get them to forge ahead and make sure that we have created a national action plan for the entire country. Yeah, Tarusha.
Professor Kulusurya, just to open a can of worms here, earlier on you spoke about harmful microorganisms being detected in some of the samples that we received from certain countries. Yeah. What exactly would happen scientifically if these harmful bacteria, if these harmful, let's take Erwinia for an example, is mixed with Sri Lankan soil?
No, naturally, the soil is ideal for that pathogenic. It's a soil bacterium, therefore it will start spreading. And we still don't know whether our soil has indigenous bacteria, indigenous microorganisms which can fight and control it.
According to the National Plant Quarantine Service, this particular type of Erwinia that we detected from the country that it was sent, there is no such organism that could counter that in Sri Lankan soil, Professor.
We don't know.
Okay.
There could be. You see, one has to go back to several billions of years ago if you want to understand these things. Now, since the origin of life on Earth, for a little more than 1 billion years, the entire Earth was occupied only by microorganisms and no other organisms. Remember, for more than 1 billion years, all the biosphere of the Earth was entirely microbial. So they occupied each and every niche and corner of the globe. And they also developed capabilities to utilize the resources available, the non-living resources available for their benefit. So if you want to mine gold, you can find a microorganism. If you want to develop a novel antibiotic, there will be a microorganism that can do it. If you can develop, as Professor Roshan has done, rapid decomposition of natural organic matter very quickly, there are microorganisms that can do. If you can develop, if you want to develop associative microorganisms which will help today's living plants, different plants have different microbiomes, you can find all of them. So the microbial world is invaluable, at the same time has no limit. So it is up to the scientists and the scientific world to make use of them, and that is exactly what all of us are doing, and that is the part that even our policymakers should understand. Each and every country has its own world of microorganisms, and if we really look for, we will be able to find the suitable guys and make use of them. But it needs effort. It needs certain amount of investment. That is for basic work. And once we make a breakthrough, either a government or a corporate entrepreneur, investor should come. Unfortunately, in Sri Lanka, that culture is still developing. It's not yet there. In countries like America, I have spent 2 of my sabbaticals teaching in 2 American universities. Every American university has a group of entrepreneurs who are waiting to invest, to make use of scientific findings. Our country is still in its infancy. For certain things there are some, but for instance, even the National Institute of Fundamental Studies, where I have been working until last month, we have a national battery lab which has now already developed different kinds of batteries from what are used in mobile phones as well as other things, using our local graphite, and very effective, far more effective than what is available in the market. But still they don't have an entrepreneur to take it up. So that is a missing link. I mean, extending from biological findings to other very important, valuable findings. There are a lot of things happening at the National Institute of Fundamental Studies, but no link with the with the
industry.
Understood, yeah.
other outside organizations, or very little collaboration.
Professor Roshan, on the 25th of October 2019 manifesto of presidential candidate of Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna, Gotabaya Rajapaksa,
Now President Gotabaya Rajapaksa.
Now President Gotabaya Rajapaksa was unveiled. And according to that manifesto, vistas of prosperity and splendor, the agricultural sector of the country will be transformed into using 100% organic fertilizer within 10 years. 28th of April this year, Cabinet makes a proposal to completely ban chemical fertilizer. 5th of August this year, Cabinet decides to import 99,000 metric tons of organic fertilizer. 9th of May, an extraordinary gazette was issued permitting the importation of selected chemical fertilizers. Now, if you were listening to what I was saying, government has taken decisions, they have revoked gazettes, they have reversed decisions. Now, the latest situation is there was a huge protest in Nuwara, and Primetime News at 9 o'clock tonight on TV1 reported that there are no supplies of vegetables coming from the Nuwara district to markets. And not even half of expected harvest have been reaped in the Maha season. Now we are embarking the end of the Maha season as well. My question to you is, are we too late?
Well, I must say, even if we are late, let's assume we are late, we have no choice but move forward. The reason is very simply, again, as we mentioned earlier, the chemical fertilizer prices are going up, and we have no choice but to, invent new things and find out new solutions, and whatever existing solutions, as we all have mentioned right now, to be implemented immediately and get to the level that we can actually sustain the production of this country, agricultural production of this country. So if we are not going to do that, then we are going to face dramatic issues. And I think what happened with this vegetable production, or the this lack of products in the market, is mainly due to the management issue. I believe the government should have coordinated this better with the farmer groups in those areas, which is not my mandate. Anyhow, what I see is, like, when you have a professional group like us, we can only guide with the technology and also the methodologies that they have to follow scientifically to go to that point. But by saying that, you have to think about why we should move towards the I think Professor Kurasure, what he mentioned is quite applicable when you think about what happened to our smart kids in Sri Lanka, and why we cannot actually develop new products in Sri Lanka or new innovations in that aspect, because there is no business angle to it. So why we are not thinking about R&D commercialization? So in 2014, when I first came back to Sri Lanka, actually I was thinking the same notion that any R&D work that we are carrying out cannot be basic research. You all have mentioned clearly many research institutes are out there. Then why these research institutes are not providing enough innovations to the nation so that we can actually carry out our work more scientifically or efficiently as a nation? So the reason is very simply what Professor Basnayaka said. There is no approach to have a multidisciplinary model in Sri Lanka. That means, we have to get together even with economies and also other business entrepreneurship oriented people and scientists together, even different expertises, and then only you can actually develop a total solution.
But does it seem like this government will sit down and listen to the experts and take a decision?
I think they should, because we are the people, not the government. Government is there to implement people's wish. So if we are wishing that, I think government should listen to us too, because I think
the people, Professor Roshan, what the government is saying is they have mentioned this very clearly in the manifesto, and hence this should be allowed, the banning of chemical fertilizer.
Well, okay, let's say they have mentioned that in the manifesto, which I haven't read, so I'm unable to comment on that. But the thing is, what I see is, regardless of that, I see the potential as Sri Lankan scientist for us to come up with innovative models that will sustain the our economy, as well as making sure that we will bring even foreign currency to Sri Lanka through this mechanism. So why I would say this? Let me explain this. Professor Kulusuriya mentioned about the microbiome. I can tell you there are 2 antibiotics in the world market right now. It's called Lancamycin and Lancacidine. Have been studied for many years and have published many peer-reviewed articles. And these 2 antibiotics actually created a multi-billion-dollar market with different brand names, of course. And now we are not getting a single cent out of it as royalties even. Why is that? Because it was stolen from our soil microbiome. Then the potential that Professor Kulusuri's mentioned is out there, and already world is benefiting from it. How many things are we going to lose like this if we are not listening to the science? So, or the scientists, matter of fact.
Very quickly, before I close the 2 rounds and then move on to the final round, Professor Basnayaka, hasn't this proven that decisions taken in political backrooms by people with special interest and poor technical knowledge has led to all these problems in Sri Lanka at the moment, even the fertilizer matter?
Let me give you some examples of. I have been helping TRI, right, in last few months, and hoping that the biochar will be applied very quickly into all the tea, and they are moving forward. You can't say that they are not listening. I'm very happy in a way, because I have been trying about this biochar. I got, so many years. 1994 that I got my first
That's I was about
patent.
to say, since 1994.
Yeah. So I've been threatened a number of times and all that kind of thing. But I've come to understand. I feel sad to look at all these people who cannot comprehend. Simply, the very thing about how do we go forward is each and everyone is fighting and trying to get their piece of cake or whatever. I can't understand that. So in TRI now there is some kind of understanding that we need to go forward because they have already done the research, right? There is biochar being applied and very good results. It had been done long ago actually. So I see no reason now that we don't have to fight it over all the time. We need to understand, the ministers, everybody must understand and say the path should be developed collectively. That must be done right now because we are right at the bottom. To come up, we need to come up together. Otherwise, we are going to be in a really bad shape.
Right. So we're going for a short commercial break. When we come back, it's a final round. We are in discussion with Professor Ananda Kulusuriya, Professor Gamini Seniratna, Professor Roshan Pereira, as well as Professor BFA Basnayaka. We're going for a short commercial break. Stay connected, stay with Face the Nation. We are discussing Sri Lanka's fertilizer crisis. Are we in a mess? The final round will have the answer. Take care. Welcome back. This is Face the Nation. We start off the final round with Professor Gamini Senviratna, Senior Research Professor, National Institute of Fundamental Studies. Professor, what is the way forward for Sri Lanka?
Yeah, the first thing is as far as this organic agriculture is concerned, we have to have, as I mentioned, a modern technology for this. Now, what we have proposed in a way is we have put a name to that, like bioorganic. So conventionally in the world, what the people did, and in some countries it has failed, to maintain the yields when you are doing organic, mainly because they didn't consider about the biological component of organic agriculture. If we couple organic, whatever the fertilizer or compost, with biological component, we can make the organic matter like fertilizer to give some nutrients to the plant. If we just put it without biological components, it starts to degrade very slowly and giving the plants slowly the nutrients. Then there's a deficiency of nutrients to the plant. That's why we get a yield decline at the end. So those are the novel technologies that have been developed in the world as well as in this country. And now we have proven that if we use this novel technology, we won't get a yield decline. We can maintain the present yield even with organic agriculture. So now our target for the future, now we have come up to 100,000 acres of paddy cultivation with chemical plus bio, but from this point onwards, what we are going to convert using this novel technology, biological technology, bioorganic, to expand it further. By 2023, we are going to sort of apply this novel biological organic technology to the entire paddy cultivation, and the infrastructure for this is now being built to produce the required amount of material, especially biological and organic matter. That is from my part. That's what I.
Thank you very much.
We are directing towards the third.
Thank you very much, Professor Gamini Senviratna, Senior Research Professor, National Institute of Fundamental Studies. I now move my attention to Professor B.F.A. Basnaika, Emeritus Professor, Department of Agricultural Engineering, University of Peradeniya.
Yes, thank you very much. This basically comes down to giving confidence to making the biochar and immediately get down to doing field testing work and providing the know-how. So we do need to find a mechanism. Like TRI, we have people now working, Dr. Vimala Dasa and all of them are now going in that direction to produce the biochar. At the same time, we need to look at some of the misconceptions of all the publications which have been done to tell the people all of the major issues of the fertilizer, inorganic fertilizer that we have been utilizing, and therefore to give that motivation to go for organic. We need to convince the people because there's no point in opposing, but we need to go forward in this endeavor. For that, we have mathematical models developed, all right, that we are proud of. It is one of the best. Dr. Aryavansa, she will be able to actually do most of the work in this area, in which we can actually predict the yields for the future, and to be able to come up and say we can double the yields even in tea. So by using organic agriculture, we are going to revolutionize the entire system. I'm very confident about that. I think that way, with the help of the universities and working together with the institutes, we will be able to find the path.
Thank you very much, Professor Basnaika. I now move my attention to Professor Roshan Pereira.
Now, thank you very much. Again, this is the moment that we are actually, as scientists, we have been waiting for, especially with regard to biostimulants, which I would like to propose as a solution for the biofertilizer or even the compost fertilizer business out there, mainly because it is possible with the biostimulants we can get a higher yield, and also we can use less fertilizer and also achieve the targets that we want to achieve with the chemical fertilizer. So one great point that I want to make here is like, actually when you look at the NPK model, this chemical fertilizer model out there in the world, we cannot deviate from that model into a new model in Sri Lanka. Even though we are going for organic agriculture or even bioorganic agriculture, as Professor Gamini mentioned, it is time for us to realize NPK is our standard, because those are the macronutrients we require plants to have its functions to be carried out. So in order to do that, we need to actually come up with an indigenous solution with the microbiome and the microbes we have in our soil, to create unique secondary metabolized processes within the mechanism of fertilizer formation. So what we have done so far is making sure our nitrogen source has been rediscovered as amino acids, as well as our phosphorus and potassium, as Professor Kulasuriya mentioned, and also Professor Basnaika mentioned, to keep it in the level that is required for the plants. So that way we are not deviating from the NPK model that is standard. Then by doing that, we came up with a unique formula, and that unique formula is the way forward mechanism. I think it is high time for this country to accept that formula and then realize we have to get together as scientists, as professionals, and making sure it will be conveyed to the people of this country. We are not forming or carrying out a process that is primitive, like our conventional agricultural methodologies for making compost, but we are actually doing much higher advanced technology here, so that we will be able to produce enough quantum of fertilizer within the country, and then again addressing the fact that these things can be even exported to other countries in the future. So that's where we should look into, because this is a Tesla moment, I would like to call, in Sri Lanka. Whether you call it an opportunity or whether it's a disaster, it's up to you, but I think it's an opportunity as a scientist.
Thank you very much, Professor Roshan Pereira. I now move my attention to Professor Ananda Kulasuriya, Emeritus Professor, University of Peradeniya, former Professor of Microbiology and former Dean, Faculty of Science, University of Peradeniya.
Thank you. The way forward, as far as I can see, is to first have a extremely good rapport with the Department of Agriculture, which is the mandated organization for crop production and food security. And I'm happy to note that it is happening, because most of our biofertilizers are now being purchased by the department and being distributed to the farmers. And also I would like to reiterate my suggestion that the department should have at least one or perhaps a team of qualified microbiologists as part of their cadre who can implement these things with a good scientific understanding. Then there's another aspect which I want to bring in within this short time, that is now only 20 to 30% of the added fertilizers are taken up by the crops, and all my colleagues are trying to show how this can be increased, the uptake of the added nutrients by various methods, particularly through microbiology. But then what happens to the rest? What happens to the 70 and 80% that is not taken up by the crop? Now that is getting washed off, washed down the streams, through the rivers, onto the lakes, and that is where pollution is spreading. So we should not ignore that aspect. There are a lot of things that we can do to minimize this washing getting into our waterways. This is another aspect. By consolidating and strengthening the river banks, and the government should adopt a very strict policy on sand mining, which is actually destroying the river banks and taking all the colloidal matter together with the dissolved nutrients through the rivers to our lakes, where there are a lot of algal problems coming up. And I have done that research myself, surveying 65 reservoirs. Almost all of them are now dominated by toxigenic algae, which causes so many environmental diseases. So we can also entrust the plantations to do this as part of to consolidate their boundaries of streams and rivers, growing bamboo. And bamboo is the best raw material for biochar. So you can get two birds with one shot. Similarly, when you go to the dry areas, you could plant trees like kumbuk, Permelia arjuna, which have been done by our ancient kings. That is to consolidate the river banks as well as to absorb the excess nutrients that are flowing through the rivers to our lakes and pollute them. So those would be the responsibilities according to today's division of ministries by the Environment Department. So there are a lot more things that should be done to improve crop production by efficient absorption, at the same time to minimize environment pollution, which we are highly, not only us, the entire world, according to Sustainable Development Goals on N management, they say by 2030 all countries should strive to minimize or half the nitrogen that is dissolved and getting into waterways.
Right.
So this is the way forward. You can do two things: improve the uptake through microbial and other organic material, enriching the soil so that the nutrients added will be retained through microbial activity, efficiently converted and supplied to the plants, thereby improving growth and yield. At the same time, whatever is lost, we should try and keep it, particularly to the tea estates. You see, today we are growing tea on clay. There is no topsoil. So we should, while we restore the topsoil by all possible means, we should also try and consolidate and retain the nutrients added within those soils.
Thank you very much, Professor Anandakura Surya, Emeritus Professor, University of Peradeniya, for joining us this evening on Face the Nation. Professor Garbini Senaviratna, Senior Research Professor, National Institute of Fundamental Studies. Professor Roshan Pereira, Professor of Chemistry and Biochemistry, former Professor, Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry, the University of Texas, USA. And also Professor B.F.A. Basnaika, Emeritus Professor, Department of Agricultural Engineering, University of Peradeniya, for joining us this evening on Face the Nation to discuss Sri Lanka's fertilizer crisis. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us. Thank you very much, Nadeem. Thank you very much, Tarusha, for joining us this evening on Face the Nation. I leave you tonight with a quote, as I always do. Making good decisions are a crucial skill at every level. Take care and good night.